Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the 1997 Fleer Ultra baseball release. 1997 was probably the single most important year for Fleer because they had to reinvent themselves. 1997 was when they finally settled down and defined what they were going to be moving forward. In the 1980s, they were one of the three card brands. That's just what they were. But as the 90s started to progress, Fleer was able to take advantage of inserts as really being the core of their brand. And that carried them for quite a few years. But by the time they got to the mid-90s, none of their cards were iconic. Topps, Donruss, these cards had a quality to them where they were respected throughout the hobby. Fleer cards just didn't really stand out. And 1995 was especially bad, where Fleer Ultra just kind of got blended into everything else. Flair was no longer very distinct, and Fleer, they got so carried away with inserts, they let it infect the main set. So 1996, they had to throw everything around, play around, especially in football. They got crazy in football, and figure out just what is Fleer going to be. And by the end of the year, with their basketball release, they finally settled on what Flair and what Ultra were going to be. And what they developed for Ultra was something that was so well formed that it would remain the iconic look of Ultra all the way through to the end. They would be making variations every single year, but what they created in 1996-97 was the strong foundation that they needed to carry across. And so by the time that the 1997 card year began with baseball, what baseball card collectors found was a well-crafted Ultra card that was truly iconic, did all the things that it needed to do, especially by embracing parallels and embracing them well. So the 1997 design is a full bleed image with an Ultra logo that is in holofoil, that is a standardized logo so they don't change it between sports. And then down at the bottom, they have a signature style writing for the player name, not a replica of a signature, but a font that is inspired by signatures. That's what the player name is in holofoil. And then the tail that comes off of every single one features the team name. And that's it. On the card back, it's a big image of the player and all monochromatic. And then they have basically some basic stats. And again, that's it. That's all they needed to do for the card. And it was such a basic and simple model that could be evolved over time. It was a perfect design. But a big part of that was because it was designed around parallels, specifically two. They once again did their gold medallion parallel, but the gold medallion in 1997 was where they took the holofoil and they replaced it with gold holofoil. That's it. On the card back, they do have a G next to the number, so that's distinct as well. But this is one per pack like they'd been doing the previous couple of years. But more distinct than that is they also have a platinum parallel. And this is where they go back to a silver holofoil, but they have a raindrop-like prismatic effect for the holofoil, which gives the cards some liveliness and makes them very distinct. And these cards are numbered with a P on the back. And these cards are more like one per box, so they're a lot harder to get. But if you look at all three cards together, you'll notice that they have one image for the base card, and then the two parallels share a different image. So that means that every single player in the entire card set has two images, one for the base level and then another image that's used for both of the parallels. And the whole card set is done this way. And by the whole card set, I mean this is two series, but there are no subsets and there are no checklists. So every single one of the cards in the set is done exactly the same way. Even rookies, there's nothing different. But that doesn't mean that everything is simple with the set, because Series 1 is 1 through 300. Series 2 is 301 through 450 for people who collect through retail packs. But if you were collecting with hobby packs, there were actually an additional 103 cards. So that means the hobby packs contained cards 301 through 553. And that means that the last 103 cards are SP cards that because they were only released in hobby and not in retail. And that last card, 553, is worth noting because it is a card of rookie Hideki Irabu. Now, just about every single year there was a Japanese superstar that crossed the Pacific and joined the Major League Baseball ranks, whether that was Hideo Nomo, whether it was Chan-Ho Park. Well, in 1997, that was Hideki Irabu. And he was so excited, or he was such an exciting prospect, that Score even made a Japanese language card of him. For Ultra, they didn't bother with that. They just took the last card in the set and dedicated that to him, so 553. The card is no more rare than any of the cards before it, 552, 551, 550, all the same. But they did do something special with him because Fleer released Ultra mainly in the US, but they also released it in Japan as well. And in Japanese packs, they had a special insert for Hideki Irabu, a commemorative set of 3 cards where each one of these cards has a white and blue border around the card, and it has a logo for the collector's edition set that is a part of. Each one of the cards is numbered C1, C2, or C3, and the cards are all individually serial numbered out of 500. And these were not easy to pull out of packs. They were more like case hits, even for the Japanese market, which is where these cards were distributed. But if you wanted to get your hands on one of these, there was actually an easier way of doing that, because every single box released in Japan had a box topper inside of it, which was one of these 3 cards. So each one of the cards, it's obviously a much larger version of each one of the cards. The cards, though, are all serial numbered out of 2,750. And if that number looks kind of weird, understand that's because there are 4 cards. Now, if you're good enough at math, you may have figured out, well, now, wait a minute here. 4 cards, but there are 3 cards in the commemorative set, and that is true. So the box toppers have C1, C2, and C3, all numbered out of 2,750. They also have a C4, which is a blow-up version of card number 553 from the set. And that card is also numbered 2,750. So that means that there are 7 special cards of Hideki Irabu. There's C1, C2, C3 regular, C1, C2, C3, and C4 jumbo. And then if you're trying to figure out how many cards they made total, there's also the base card, and there is the gold medallion, and there's the platinum medallion. So there are 10 different Hideki Irabu cards in the 1997 release. I'm pretty sure he didn't show up in any of the insert sets. I think it's just these. But there we go. That's the set. And like I said, there weren't any checklist cards in the set because what they'd been doing in baseball was they had a special checklist set of cards which were a standalone set, and 1997 was no different. So there are 10 checklist cards, cards 1 through 10, but there's also cards 1 through 10. They repeat the numbers for Series 2 checklists, so the way you can tell the difference is that checklists for Series 1 all have a dull silver foil. The checklists for Series 2 have a hollow foil on them. And that brings the core of the set to a close. Now we can finally move on to inserts, and we got a lot of inserts to go through. And the inserts are pretty fun because there's a lot of variety to them, starting off with Baseball Heroes. This is a die-cut card, and it's themed around a pile of baseballs, which gives a very distinctive definition to the die cutting on the card. But these cards are also very, very lightly embossed. In fact, you're probably not even going to notice it on the card front. It's really on the card back where you notice that there's the light embossing. But it gives the card a little bit of complexity to it. For my money, though, the most distinctive card in the entire set, of all the inserts, is Diamond Producers. This card has what is essentially a canvas surface on the front. Not quite, but it's pretty close. It's also kind of like dull sandpaper. It's a very unique card. But because of that dull quality, the way that the image looks on the card is very different from what you see anywhere else. And they don't even have any foil on this card. Gold foil, silver foil, doesn't matter. They didn't even bother with foil, so it just has that granular look to it, which is so unique, so distinct to these cards. And then they have Double Trouble. Now, Double Trouble is a horizontal card featuring 2 superstars from the same team. And that's what the card set is designed around. It's around teammates from different teams with a very, very bright design built around team colors for each one of the teams. Now, it's not every single team that is referenced in the set. There are only 20 cards in the set, but each one is built entirely around teammates from the same team, and so it does a great job of capturing the spirit of each team. But then, for my money, the most special of all the inserts is Fame. This is the card that I'm most impressed with because it does a couple of things at the same time. First off, it has a really nice, subtle gold stenciling on the card, which gives a really fun, elegant look to the card. The most notable thing, of course, is that the text Fame is holofoil, specifically with a star prism pattern within it, which gives it a wonderful sparkly quality that looks really cool. But as if that wasn't enough, the card is also well embossed too. Not heavily embossed, but it is an embossed card, which gives the card so much going on with it that makes it a really fun and special card to come across. Now, the variety of card stock, or at least what they're able to do with it, is really shown with their Fielder's Choice cards. The Fielder's Choice cards are done with a leather surface. I don't believe it is leather, but it comes across like leather. It feels like leather. It has the crackling in it. Even the gold foil is affected by the cracking of what is easily identified as leather. But the theme is also carried into the print. So the stitching around the border, or stitching for the border, is printed on there. There's no relief to the card. The only relief is the actual cracks on the card surface, but it does feel kind of leathery. So it's a very impressive card. Now, that's a perfect segue over to Golden Prospects, which is a card that you would expect to be more elaborate because they've done that in the past. But for 1997, this is the dull card. Every year there is some card that is underdeveloped, not necessarily a disappointment as much as it's just not well done up. And that's the way this card is. Perfectly fine, nothing wrong with it, looks really good, but just about every other card in this set is really dynamic in some way. Golden Prospects is certainly not. But what certainly is Hitting Machines. Now, Hitting Machines was a set that, especially in 1996, Fleer had a fun time with the design. For 1997, they again did a die-cut gear theme for the card. In this case, they rotated it so it's on the side of the card. But they have etched foil and they have brushed metal for the treatment of nearly the entire card surface, which makes this card really lively and very intricate. It's a really cool card and does a great job of carrying the tradition of the 1996 Hitting Machines cards quite well. This card doesn't have any parallels, but it really doesn't need one. And then there's Home Run Kings. And Home Run Kings is a really interesting card where the whole card is acetate, except for the player who is not see-through. But the card is acetate, but they have a bunch of crowns they're a holofoil prism effect. And so it gives a really cool sparkly effect. You can't really see the crowns themselves, but it gives the card a weird ethereal quality by seeing these little sparkles of light that kind of appear all over on this particular card. So very interesting how they crafted it. And then they have Leather Shop to get back to a different take on a leather card surface. This one doesn't use cracking. It uses another leather surface type of a treatment, and it does feel pretty leathery, except it's not the whole card surface, because the player, as well as that strip down the side, those are not embossed in any way. They're just normal cardstock, which gives you the feeling that all of these leather cards aren't necessarily leather at all. They're probably something else, just treated in a way that feels kind of leathery, which is a great trick to pull off and makes these cards a lot of fun to explore, especially across all of the insert designs. And then they have Power Plus, and I think it's safe to say that Power Plus, for me certainly, it's a disappointment because there's something they could have done with it. What? I'm not entirely sure. But the thing is, the card really wants for there to be some cool spectral effect going on. Instead, they just did a holofoil over the entire background, and the text is the only part that's clear to make it really pop out, but the rest of the card still has the same effect. I don't know what I wish they'd done with it, but I do feel like it is an underdeveloped card, so they could have done better. They certainly didn't, but Then they have RBI Kings, and this is kind of the opposite. In this case, almost the entire background is silver foil, but it's an intricately worked foil where it has all these leaves and tendrils, and I really like what they did. There was a lot of care put into it, but there wasn't a lot of care into making it read well, so it becomes kind of white noise. Everything blends together, including the player. And it's a shame. It's a card that I really want to advise you to spend time in looking at, but the problem is when you do look at it, you realize there's not a lot to the background. It's nice enough, but that's kind of the best way to describe it. It's nice enough. Which is kind of the exact opposite of Rookie Reflections, which is a card that is really dull in how it's designed. It's just a bullseye behind the player, and then it's the strips on the side, but that bullseye actually has a cool effect the way the light hits it and moves around, which makes this a card you don't want to spend a lot of time looking at, but exploring it. It does have a cool quality that makes it probably a more impressive card than the RBI Kings. Kind of weird, but that's how it worked. But one of the most impressive of all of these is Season Crown. Now, Fleer had already created cards with Fleer metal, where the whole card surface was silver or gold, and they had cutting into it, they had etching into it to make a portrait of a player. And then eventually they would do gold in Ultra proper. But for this 1997 set, they did a bronze card for Season Crowns, which has not just the intricacy of all the etching, but they also have different colors that are in the card. So it's not just a straight bronze. It has, maybe it has like some gold in it, but it has different tones to it, which allows the card to have more of it works a lot better as a total card, which is impressive. You don't have to get the light just right in order to be able to read it. The card always has an appearance as a card, which is a wonderful, wonderful gift. And then there's Ultra Starring Role. Now, Ultra Starring Role is a card that has gone through a bit of an evolution. When they kicked it off in 1996-97 with basketball, it was just an acetate card. Still had the star in it, but it was just a straightforward card. By the time they got to baseball, now they did die cutting. So on one side, they have part of the card that's missing, so it makes it a little bit more intricate. And then when they would get around to football with their 97 set, that card would actually have almost like, it's a sparkly surface that is gritty. It's actually in relief, which is a whole nother level. So the baseball release is basically the midpoint in evolving this particular insert set. Very impressive insert set though, all the same. And then they have their Thunderclap cards, which is a really impressive card. Now Thunderclap is a very moody design because they wanted to get that thunderstorm-like feel to the card, which comes across beautifully. But it's the speckly gold holofoil, the prismatic effect of it makes the card just really rich and lively and energetic. Makes it look really impressive, which is good for the Thunderclap tradition. So very well done. But we got to end on a not as impressive note, which is top 30. This looks at the 30 best players in the league, and the cards are not very they're not very imaginative. They almost look like an upgraded version of a 1995 design, 1995-1996 Ultra design. In this case, they have team colors, one color on the front, one on the back, and they have a big disc behind the player. And the disc is important because they have these cards, but they also have a gold parallel of all these cards. And for the gold parallel, they swapped the colors, and obviously the card itself is gold foil like a 1995 or 1996 Fleer Ultra card. This card is die cut around that disc, and the cards also are embossed. So the parallel of this card is a lot more interesting. Still not a great card when you consider some of the stuff that we saw, but it does have a little bit of fun playing into that. And that is 1997 Ultra Baseball. There's a lot to go through with this set. Even though the set itself is very simple, there was a lot more that went on with the sets. With these different inserts, it was great. And the whole story of the Hideki Irabu stuff was a fun addition as well. A really tough little element to pursue because, again, they were released in Japan, even though a lot of these cards have shown up here in the US. As you can see, I've got a few myself. So that brings Ultra up to this point. Now, I've already done the Fleer Ultra sets for baseball from 1992 or 1991 all the way up through to here. I haven't got around to 98 and on. That's going to be coming up down the road. So definitely check those videos out. If you haven't subscribed my channel, I do urge you to do so. And yeah, thank you very much for watching.